My top 3 joyous moments of my life. There's no words to explain just how great the whole experience felt.
I think there's nothing wrong with feeling sad or angry.
Just the feeling of devastation, like, where do I go from here?
Really, it's just putting one foot in front of the other and just keep on going.
You know, people talk about resilience as your ability to bounce back. And the problem with that definition is that it implies that it's your individual responsibility. It's your responsibility to bounce, to overcome. And that's actually not what the science says anymore.
You need to ask for help. You don't ask for help enough. You're embarrassed. The world doesn't owe you joy. You deserve, you basically deserve what you get in many cases.
In one study, meditation was an even more effective cure for anxiety than even anti-anxiety drugs themselves.
It is the epitome, the top, the absolute everything that brings great joy and passion, and then multiply that by a gazillion times.
The starting point for happiness is
no matter a person's color or mother tongue or situation in life, we all speak the same language when it comes to our most cherished desire. Basically, we all want to be happy. We want to provide well for ourselves and our loved ones. We want to be able to laugh and retain that good feeling throughout the day. We want to feel at peace with ourselves, comfortable within our skin. A quote from Journey to Joy. You know, more than 2 decades ago, when I was in a deep depression, writing this book helped me navigate my way back to happiness. And as I crossed Canada on a book tour with Journey to Joy, it was such a pleasant surprise to see how many women and men gravitated to its message and actually expressed relief at being able to speak about the subject. Because back then, speaking openly about our mental health challenges was just not the done thing. What I didn't know was that at that very moment in time, human beings were about to embark on a whole new adventure of discovery as to what happiness is and how each one of us can maximize our experience of it. Join me for the next hour or so on a journey of discovery as to what science and everyday wisdom can tell us about joy, where it comes from, how we can get more of it, and how we can get it back when the inevitable challenges of life bring us to our knees. Happiness has been the subject of inquiry throughout the ages. From ancient Egyptians to Socrates to St. Augustine and William Blake, philosophers, theologians, poets, and others have been exploring what it takes to lead a happy life. In the last 2 decades, happiness has come under the microscope of scientists and researchers like never before. Human thoughts, emotions, and behaviors have been the focus of psychologists since the origin of modern psychology in the 1800s. Up to the late 1990s, psychology was concerned with treating mental illnesses. However, when Martin Seligman took over as the head of the American Psychology Association, he led the way in focusing attention on happiness. Soon, not only psychologists were studying well-being, but economists as well. In 2008, the tiny state of Bhutan decided to measure its progress not only by economic calculations, but by the happiness of its people. That inspired the United Nations and others to investigate happiness on an international scale.
We look at well-being as both subjective well-being, and which is happiness, and objective well-being. The standard approach to well-being is to look at income and wealth and economic security, consumption, all those, and there's actual data for that in terms of hard data, numbers data. So that's an important part of well-being. You know, all poverty measurement is based on income. On the other hand, there's what people feel about their level of well-being. That's called subjective well-being. It's often referred to as happiness, and the better definition is really life satisfaction. There's different definitions of happiness. You can have the short-term happiness, whether you're happy today, positive effect or negative effect, or whether looking back over your life, do you have a high or low level of satisfaction with your life experience?
The term happiness, everybody have their own feeling what it is, and then it doesn't feel so scientific. It is used in scientific literature too, just because it connects with people, and it is what interests people. Subjective well-being is kind of the scientific concept that is often used when we study happiness. In other words, happiness when we talk to the general public. The main editor of the World Happiness Report said that, like, even in that report we could use subjective well-being as the main term, but nobody would read a report that has the name the World Subjective Wellbeing Report. So that's why it's called the World Happiness Report.
The World Happiness Report asks people in over 140 countries how satisfied they are with a number of factors in their lives. This can include whether they can live comfortably on their present income and whether they feel safe walking alone at night. Nordic countries such as Finland and Denmark have consistently ranked in the top 10. But African and Asian countries have been stuck at the bottom of the list. While the World Happiness Report is the most comprehensive tool measuring what people around the world think about their lives, some feel it may not be quite accurate. Even residents of Nordic countries have expressed surprise at being named among the happiest in the world. And some African scholars think it unfair that they are ranked low on the table.
The first challenge is that studies on happiness and well-being started in Northern America, using the English language and investigating these aspects among mostly US citizens, which of course don't represent even Northern America, because Canada is different, but also even less the world. And so researchers, by starting collecting data in the US, have envisaged a description of happiness which is very typical American, I would say. Happiness is satisfaction with achievements, so very pragmatic and very related to what you achieve in your daily life, materially and not materially, and also great positive emotions. And so the focus was on these two aspects of well-being. But of course, we know, for example, that in many other parts of the world, especially, for example, in Asian countries, especially East Asian and Southern Asian countries, people are not so keen to show happiness in the ways Westerners do. They are much more, let's say, withdrawn and not so interested in experiencing very high arousal emotions. Moreover, this emphasis on achievement is an issue because, for example, when people think about achievement, they think about money and work and something that you can reach through your own effort and engagement. But of course, this is a limitation because, for example, retired people can just enjoy life without posing themselves achievements to pursue. Or people living a simpler life are not that much focusing on individual achievement, but on a good relationship with others, in the community, in the family, in the village. So this view of happiness is partial, because it only covers a part of the world.
You are measuring others with your own measurements that are not applicable to others. So you can't use your parameter to come and judge me and say, I'm not good enough. That is exactly what is happening in those kind of measurements or results you see in the West. Because when you say they are low on happiness, have you even bothered to ask them what makes them to be happy? To understand what makes an African man happy, you need to understand those values that he or she cherishes. The Westerners, they fall into the category of individualistic cultures. The African falls under the collectivistic culture. In other words, we as Africans, we are a group people. We are a family people. We are community oriented. And above all, we are also very spiritual in our approach. Now, because of this collectivistic nature, there's this saying, there's a saying in South Africa that says Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a word which stands for I am because we are. I am nothing if we are nothing. And we have all the pleasures of life as a person. That cannot make me a happy man. If my sister, my brother, my family members are incapacitated, those are the issues. Our values are different.
With other colleagues with whom we have been collaborating since now maybe 15 years already, we wondered what could we do to look at happiness in a different way. A very simple thing. Go to people and asking them, please, can you describe what is happiness for you in your own words? Of course, in psychology, this approach is not very popular because it is, so people write whatever they want. And what can we do with all these list of descriptions? It is very complicated to turn them into something significant that can be understood and published in a scientific paper, for example. So it is a lot of work for researchers. But our feeling was that unless we don't do it, we will never know what do lay people think about happiness.
I think happiness is a contentment with yourself and what you're doing and how you're living your life. I think the happy life is reflected in a person's health and well-being. You can identify people who are happy by the appearance of their face, their posture. You can identify people who are sad similarly.
2 words, contentment and acceptance. For me, when you're content, that means that everything is okay.
I think it's feeling good about yourself and what you're doing. I mean, of course, it's not always going to be 100% feeling good, but you learn to deal with the sad feelings, but don't let them overwhelm you.
So it's a general good feeling. And it's also an acceptance of, the ups and the downs. It's not always perfect, but it's an acceptance of life as it is. Things happen, and you have to kind of go with the flow and make the best of it.
Happiness is something that can be very momentary. And I think the goal of contentment and a feeling of gratitude each day, the chances of feeling and expressing that happiness are increased.
When researchers analyzed the responses of people from rich and poor nations around the world as to what makes for a happy life, they discovered some unexpected results.
About 60% altogether of the contextual definition of happiness refer to family and relationships. Happiness is my children. Happiness is my grandchildren, having a beautiful family, having a nice relationship with my partner, having trustful and faithful friends. So happiness in the context of relationships. And you see that work is cited, health is cited, but none of them gets such a big importance like relationships. Basically, we did not find any difference across countries concerning the focus on family and relationships. We also looked at the psychological definitions of happiness. When people define happiness with psychological examples, what do they say? And you can see here that satisfaction accounted for less than 10% of the answers. Achievement, less than 10%. Positive emotions, 15%. But the highest share in these answers was harmony and balance. This was a surprise because this dimension was never studied in psychology as a definition of happiness. How did people define harmony and balance? The feeling of inner harmony, feeling acceptance of life, feeling tuned with the universe, feeling peaceful inside, feeling an acceptance of one's positive and negative aspects. So this was a much more, let's say, low arousal, appeasement, and acceptance of life. Overall, regardless of gender, regardless of age, in all the countries, there was this trend of harmony and balance predominating. And what were the ingredients of harmony and balance? You can see here, psychophysical balance, so balance with mind and body, contentment, serenity, acceptance, peacefulness. So these were the aspects of harmony and balance equated to happiness.
The 3 happiest moments of my life were meeting my husband, finding someone that I actually felt I had a lot in common with and we could share a life together. Definitely becoming a mom. I have a son and a daughter, and they're the lights of my life. And then I guess the third, probably most important moment to me was my marriage came to an end. We separated, and I was pretty devastated for quite a while. But then I came to the moment where I realized that I can look after myself and I can be happy. And that was, I guess, crucial. Or I probably would have been a basket case.
I'm still awed that I was able to bear a human being in my womb and have it delivered, a human being. It still floors me. I can't, I mean, that's pure joy every time I think about it.
I am a writer, and I remember I had a publisher, and the very first time I held my book that I had written in my hand, that was amazing, you know, so that was a big moment for me.
I think my marriage would be one of them. And I think accomplishments that I've made, like for example, when I was in high school, I was very active in sports and I won a few championships. And then when I went into the Navy, receiving my commission, I think working with kids, I was also a high school teacher. And I just like working with kids, and it was good to see them succeed and enjoy life, not only academically, but in their sports and recreational life as well.
My top 3 joyous moments of my life, I'll say the first one was starting a family, getting married. I have a wonderful husband. I cannot ask for better. and having two beautiful daughters. I think to me that it continues to be one of the joyous, happiest times of my life. I was also blessed with a good career. I was a school teacher for 30 years, 28 years in the same school, and I really enjoyed my work. I was surrounded by a good group of peers. We were very supportive for each other, so I enjoyed going to work. The third one is the best one of all. It's becoming a grandmother. I'm a grandmother to one child so far, and the day that she was born, I was there. I witnessed the birth, and there's no words to explain just how great the whole experience felt like. You know, you give birth yourself to two daughters, but when you watch your own daughter give birth to another human being, it's out of this world.
The findings of Dr. Delefave's research and the feedback we got from our own interviews directly contradict a popular notion about happiness. All over social media, in the movies, magazines, and advertising, we are bombarded with images that suggest that the sure ticket to happiness is money, lots of it, and the luxuries it can buy.
Obviously, money is important, and people with higher incomes tend to be, on average, happier or have greater levels of life satisfaction than people with lower incomes. But the differences are relatively small, and there's many other factors that are much more important than determining whether you rate your life as satisfied or fully satisfied. It doesn't matter much. I don't want to say it's never important, because it is important. You can have particularly a lot of stress if you're basically at the bottom and can't make your rent. So that's definitely, obviously. But so therefore, the level of happiness does go up with income. But for many, it reaches kind of a plateau, and after maybe $100,000 or $200,000, it doesn't really add much.
Canada has a long history of collecting data that can help paint a picture of people's satisfaction with their life. Now, Vancouver often shows up on international lists as one of the top cities in the world. And with BC being one of the warmest and most prosperous provinces in Canada, you might think that they would top the list for happiness. But that's not the case.
Not necessarily the West that's better off, it's actually the East, even though the weather might not be as good down there. Weather doesn't seem to be a major factor. People tend to adjust to the weather, or else they move away if they hate the weather really badly. But the province that does the best was Prince Edward Island, and the key factor that seemed to be explaining the higher level of happiness in Prince Edward Island was the greater sense of community, sense of belonging to a unit. It's a very small province. People know each other. They have a long history together, and they feel that they have some control over their lives. Whereas Toronto or Ontario has big centers like Toronto, and overall, if we look at the CMAs, the big cities don't do well for happiness. Because again, often it's stressful, traffic jams. Commuting does not contribute to happiness. If people have to commute long distance or get stuff in traffic, that doesn't make them happy. Also, it can be stressful in big cities. There's problems with housing, affordability, and there's also a sense of lack of community. If you live in a big high-rise, you might not really know your neighbors like you would if you're in a small town, for example. So we find that Vancouver and Toronto actually have lower levels of happiness than other CMAs, and certainly lower than the provinces in which they're located. Persons that have been here for long periods of time, immigrants that have been here 50 years or more, or 40 years, they don't really have much difference in terms of their overall level of satisfaction from native-born Canadians. It's more the recent immigrants that have a slightly lower level of life satisfaction. And that's, again, linked to many factors. Obviously, it's linked to the fact that basically their labor market experience might not be that great. They might have trained in a certain profession abroad, come to Canada, their skills aren't recognized, and they have to do a lower level job because of that. It might be because their salary is a lot lower. It might be because of housing costs. So it might be because they don't feel integrated into the overall Canadian society. At least after initial arrival. So there is a slightly lower level of life satisfaction for recent immigrants, which is understandable. The transition can be hard for someone coming to Canada. Now, over time, they seem to catch up.
When you are a migrant, you want a good job. You want a good house. But unfortunately, that is not the way it works in most Western countries. If you are not with your family, that is a very huge setback. And if your wife is not even there with you, it's even much more terrible. If you're a married person and all that. So those are some of the issues that strongly affect whether you will be happy in a certain way or not happy in a certain way.
Just as family and those we're close to bring us the greatest happiness, on the flip side, some of our greatest challenges stem from our relationships.
One of the most difficult moments recently has been learning that my elder sister has cancer. So she's living with it, and every day is a blessing because you don't know what tomorrow is going to be. So you bless every day that she is here, and hope that tomorrow, that she will have another tomorrow.
When my daughter was 13, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And fortunately it was benign and they got it all. But just that, remembering that time period, the knots in my stomach, the worry, the fear that I was going to lose her was terrible. I guess the next would be, all of them together, is the death of my parents, because they both lived here in Elliott Lake, and I traveled at one point from Australia, another point from Ottawa to be here for them as they were going, and it was heartbreaking and it was stressful, and we learned so much about yourself and how strong you are or how weak you are in some respects. The third one would be the end of my marriage, and just the feeling of devastation, like, where do I go from here? I gave up a career to be married to this man, and now I'm on my own. But I wasn't. I have family. So that's through that too.
Well, I think one of the most difficult ones was my divorce. That's always a very painful and unfortunate experience. I think another one would be the death of my son, passing away. A parent should not have to bury their child.
I found it very tough when my dad died, because I was only 12, and that was really a hard time in my life, because I was what they called one of those smart kids, and I was skipped grades. They don't do that anymore, I hope, but they used to do that. So I was just also beginning high school, which is kind of a scary, like this all happened at the same time. And then there was a house move all at the same time. And I always remember that as such a, the sadness of my mother and starting new school, all these things happening at once. So I think that was the first really hard thing in my life. Back in the 70s, I moved with the father of my children, first husband. We moved to New Zealand, and we were there for 5 years, which was, quite nice. However, it was during that time that my marriage ended. And that was a tough time for me, because I had 2 daughters. So I was suddenly a single mom and in a foreign country where I had no support. So I remember that. That was a tough time. That happened, I think, in the second year of my residence there. And I stayed in New Zealand working for 5 years because I was determined to come home a winner. I wanted to come home happy. Okay, another tough time was kind of a bittersweet moment in my life, because it was at the time my mom died. And again, I was 49 years old, so I guess you call it that, middle-aged. I had twin grandsons were born, and I was just elated and happy. And 3 days later, my mother died. So that was a tough time for me, because I had the happiness and the sadness. It was everything mixed up.
I lost my mom when I was 16 years old, and it was sudden. So that was very sad. At first I was almost mad at her, not her fault, but I mean, when you're young, you don't always understand why people leave you at that age. But then again, with the support of family, I made it through.
The dissolution of my marriage, which was very difficult because I'm a very loyal person. All I did was put one foot in front of the other. Went to the help that was available then, that was offered then, spoke to, medical professionals, psychiatrists, but really it's just putting one foot in front of the other and just keep on going.
So I'm an addictions counselor at the Camille Center in Elliott Lake. How did I come to be that? I am also a recovering addict and alcoholic. At the end of this month, I will celebrate 22 years of sobriety. And I always wanted to give back. There's a lot of factors at work with addiction. For the most part, I find a very high percentage of my clients have suffered trauma, most often in childhood. So they didn't have a great start to begin with. They started out angry, scared, confused. They didn't fit in. I know I felt like that. I went to kindergarten and didn't fit in. I didn't know what to do with the pain and the anger, and neither do they. And I didn't like feeling like that, much as my clients. And we find coping mechanisms. And drugs and alcohol are handy. They're everywhere. And they do what they're supposed to do, and that is change the way you feel, the way you look at things, the way you see things. It numbs a lot of pain. You're able to stuff it, numb it, and not have to deal with it. Unfortunately, that coping mechanism that started out as help now becomes what is hurting us.
People talk about resilience as your ability to bounce back. And the problem with that definition, and in fact, it's kind of about 30 years out of date now, is that it implies that it's your individual responsibility. It's your responsibility to bounce, to overcome. And that's actually not what the science says anymore. Now we're understanding that your ability to recover is always going to be a reflection of your individual talents, yes, your cognitions, your ways of thinking, yes, but it's also going to be a big part of whether or not you have the opportunities to realize your potential outside of you. So I talk about, my definition of resilience has been that we are resilient if we can navigate to the resources we need and negotiate or ask for the kinds of resources we need that are most meaningful to us. An individual can think, I'm going to be positive and embrace the future, and I'm going to bounce back from adversity. That's great. But a lot of how we bounce is always dependent on the kinds of circumstances we have, from our housing and transportation systems and visa programs, and how we're treated by our communities and opportunities to play sports or learn music or whatever, how our culture is celebrated. These are so many factors outside of us that make it determine whether or not we're going to bounce well or not bounce at all.
Some people think resilience is going it alone, but it's really the opposite. The most resilient people have a good support network. Now, it doesn't even necessarily have to be family. Anybody can be part of your chosen family. And it doesn't have to be 10 or 20 people. It can be one person or two people that you reliably have in your life that you feel, yes, those people, will be here, but I call them at 3 a.m. They will be there for me. I know people who, when we talk about this, they cry sometimes because they think, I don't know. if I have one or two people even that I can reliably call. And so it's about stepping back and saying, well, who in my life could I nurture this kind of relationship with? And start with you and say, well, I'm going to be the change, right? I'm going to reach out to that person.
I'm a Catholic, and when I lived in Mississauga and before here, I was an integral part of a family of people at my church. They helped me when my mom died. They came to one of my friends who lived close by. I called and I said, look, my mom's just died. And she hung up on me. And I thought, that's strange. She was knocking on my door within 3 minutes. She just came to see me because she knows what I was going through, and she loved my mom. And there were other friends who came to surround me. Now, both my sisters are married. I'm the only one that's single. But I had so many friends through work and through church, so that was important to me.
Anytime you've got a very difficult situation, being able to talk with other people is very helpful, and having supportive friends to whom you can sound off and explore. Actually, I wish I could have done it even more, explore feelings with my friends and my family. We've had a very large family, and we were fairly close, and so I had some good contacts with my brother and a couple of my sisters. Unfortunately, I'm the last one alive in my family, so that is no longer an option for me.
What helped me through the difficult times was having supportive family and friends, talking to them probably ad nauseum, but crying on their shoulders when I needed to. I think that was the big thing, is crying it out, because you can't hold it all in forever.
A lot of people don't understand just how strong addicts are. They're survivors of incest, physical abuse, sexual, emotional, financial, any kind of abuse you can think of. A lot of them have been victims of it, and they're still here. The fact that they're still here and now are willing to fight to get their lives back just inspires me over and over and over again, because I know what that takes, and it's not easy. I have some clients that come back and come back and come back, and they get embarrassed and they're upset by their relapse, and I tell them, don't you dare be upset about that. It doesn't matter how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up, and you got up again, and you survived long enough to come here and try again. And that's what counts. You're strong, you're resilient, and you're not a quitter. They have to find the support that they need. The 12-step programs, the first word of their first step is we. They don't have to do it by themselves, which they've tried to do for so long. We always have them set up with counseling for at least 6 months to a year afterwards. We want them to continue that work. We want them to get a sponsor. We want them to find new friends and new support. And we want them to remember, above all else, they don't have to do it alone. That people are out there waiting to help. They just want to help. People who were like them have amazing jobs now, and that's they just want to help give back.
And I think having that particular traditional knowledge, I mean, you understand that we are connected through values, beliefs, and practices that bring joy, bring happiness to each other. And that's one aspect that's good, but we need those skills, we need those tool sets. We need to build community, we need to lift up our people that have fallen. And that's the big challenge today. I'm a staunch believer that I would like, if I was fallen, I would like somebody that had fallen before me to pick me up and to show me the way. And that's the traditional thinking. It's very much a traditional thinking, but it's for our wellness. If we're well, there's global wellness, there's community wellness, and we're able to deal with the challenges that we face. You need to recognize the strengths that you do have, and you need to ask for help. We don't ask for help enough. We're embarrassed. That's one of the maladies of the 21st century is we're too afraid to ask for help.
I don't know if it's the government's job to make everybody happy, but they really should be doing as much as possible affecting the factors that make people happy. So government should address unemployment, which makes people unhappy. Government should basically help provide affordable housing, which make people happy. So government has to address the problems in these factors that determine happiness. Now, there's some governments that have gone further, like the UK government has created a Ministry of Loneliness. I'd mentioned the importance of social connections for happiness. People that are lonely are less happy. So now how government can basically force people to come together, I guess it can create locations where people can come together. So I don't know, I don't think government is the solution to our problems of unhappiness.
Ultimately, it's a dance where it's about institutions creating conditions that keep us safe and get our needs met, in combination with us doing some of the work ourselves. It's not one or the other. So, when we do enact even policies that protect people from excessive manipulative bank loans or those fast payday loans, that type of thing, which are unfortunately sometimes for people with very low credit, which is often the symptom of being a new immigrant or newcomer to Canada, they're very susceptible. But when we enact laws that at least some way protect people from the excessive abuses of that, or we have public policies around healthy alcohol consumption or drinking or smoking or anything, when we, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which allows people to secure a mortgage at a 5% down payment rather than a 20% down payment. When we have public health initiatives, food inspectors, when we have, some appeal process for rent or manipulation and unfairness when people are renters and they're getting, whatever. All of these things combine to create a more socially just environment that allow people to get their needs met. We know that people have some intimate relationship, and it doesn't have to be a sexual relationship, but it has to be an intimate, a close relationship. We also know that people who swim in sort of networks of other social interactions, and that could be with, the person you pass on the street while you're walking your dog, the person in the elevator of your condo building, the teacher of your child at the school. All of these networks of people seem to make us able to withstand stress. But it also is about communities. Do people notice you on your street? Do they, notice that maybe things aren't quite going the way they should be? And often issues like domestic violence and preventing child abuse are all social factors, not individual things that individuals change. In resilience now, we talk about multiple systems having to create a cascade, almost like dominoes. That game of dominoes, you stand the little tiles up, and it's fun, kids love to do, then they knock one, and the next one knocks, and the next one knocks. And that's really where the science of resilience is now. We're no longer looking at a single domino and saying, you can be resilient, just wobble there. Now we're saying, we understand that dominoes are all throughout society, and what we're trying to do is to get them interconnected so that your resilience is tied up with these community and social and policy and government and banking institutions and everything else.
I think some of these guys living in Europe, in Western world, they need periodic psychotherapy. Yeah, because where they live in, it's so individualistic that nobody talks to you. Nobody cares about you. Somebody can die in his or her room for months. People will not even know. Even when they smell, some odors are going out from there because they don't care. That is just the way they are. But in Africa, that is impossible. Because if you have a problem, neighbors are already knocking and saying, how are you? We haven't seen him or her yesterday. If you like, say we don't mind our business. But that is the way we are in Africa. We care for our neighbor. We love our neighbor. And because of that, that gives us our joy.
Having a well-structured society with institutions that can support us is the ideal. But often we find ourselves in situations that are far from ideal. The study of positive psychology has outlined a number of strategies individuals can turn to when the tough times strike.
A lot of people think when they see positive and positive psychology that we're telling people that they need to be positive all the time, or they need to be happy or joyous all the time. And that's really not realistic. And sometimes it's not even appropriate. You know, if your dog dies, it's really more appropriate for you to be sad at that time. It's not helpful when someone says, oh, well, look at the bright side. It's, you know, sometimes it's really more appropriate to engage in sadness when things go wrong. The problem is we don't want to get stuck there. We don't want it to stop us from being able to engage in our lives or take care of our families or go to work. And so the whole study that in that pillar of positive emotions is how can we leverage positive emotions to have a better mood every day, to be more energetic, to be more creative.
I'm a retired psycho-spiritual therapist, so I've worked with other people as well, and I've done my own, always doing my own work. And inner child work has been very important to me. And, you know, the healing, you know, it's ongoing. So I guess I would try to reassure that young girl that, you know, things are tough right now, but they're going to get better.
Joy doesn't come to you. You have to work at it. So that the idea is to just be active with people and things and doing things. The world doesn't owe you joy. You deserve, you basically deserve what you get in many cases. But it is a matter, I think, of going out and being active in your physical activity, taking good care of your body, and also the social activity in terms of the people that you're dealing with, and enjoy the companionship and give companionship and friendship.
Some people think either you're born resilient and you're not. And in fact, what we know is that resilience can be taught. Once we learn how to think differently about a situation, so to have more optimism about those things, also how we can manage our emotions on a daily basis to be more resilient, and also how to behave differently to be resilient.
Live life. Go for it. Don't be passive, be active. Have confidence in yourself. Be very, very active physically. Again, because I was very involved in sports and that, it's helped me. And I think taking good care of your body. I'm in reasonably good health. I've had all the other traditional problems associated with aging, but on the other hand, I think I'm in very good shape. And so I'm quite active now, not only in sailing, but curling and playing pickleball.
You know, often people forget the physical side of resilience. You know, if you're not eating well, you're not exercising, you're not sleeping enough every day, then that is definitely something that can affect your resilience. You know, if you're just physically exhausted, it's going to be impossible for you to be able to show up every day, or when something goes wrong. I kind of think of resilience sort of like a well, you know, and when the well is full and you have an adversity that happens, you can roll the bucket down and the water is, you know, relatively high. So it's not that hard to kind of dip into the well and pull that bucket up and use some of that energy to get you through, you know, those times of adversity. But when your bucket or when your well is constantly empty or low and there's no resources for you to call upon, then you could find yourself becoming mentally ill or burning out because you just don't have the resources to manage when something goes wrong. So resilience is really about keeping that well full on a daily basis.
If you have a healthy behavior, then you are likely to have better health.
Dr. Stedman's research looked at the lives of thousands of people who either engaged in or refrained from smoking, consuming alcohol, eating a healthy diet, and performing physical activity. In tracking their life satisfaction over nearly a decade, she found that those who chose healthy behaviors saw their level of happiness increase over time.
If you have a very bad behavior, you probably will get health issues. If you have good behavior, you won't get them, which enables you to pursue your goals and in general have less things to worry about in your life, which is reflected in better life satisfaction. A change in any of these behaviors did have impact on later subjective well-being. Physical activity showed the least effect compared to the other three. So we had smoking, alcohol consumption, and dietary habits. And when I was thinking about this, I thought that smoking, if you're a smoker now, if you use much alcohol, or if you have a bad diet, those have maybe even stronger bad health outcomes than if you don't move. Well, we show that if you have healthy behavior now, your life satisfaction is expected to change to the positive. And then about what the average person can take out, I would say that these can serve as the kind of extra motivator for healthy behavior, because often in the previous decades, doing or having a healthy lifestyle has felt like a burden, because it's like you shouldn't do this because of your maybe later health, or so that you don't feel these symptoms. So kind of a negative label on it all. But what I wanted to bring is that actually doing this improves your mood, improves your happiness in life.
Exercise is good for everything. Good for your body, good for your health, but also good for your cognitive abilities. It actually is one of the few things that you can do that promotes neurogenesis, which is the development of new brain cells. Because once you kind of reach your mid-20s, we kind of start to decrease the number of new brain cells that we produce. But when you exercise, it actually can promote new brain cells in your brain. So if you want to stay cognitively alert, I always say, you want to stay, vital until your late years, in your 90s. Exercise is the key to everything, I think. Because when you feel strong in your body, it sends a message to your brain, you are strong. Well, it's really well documented that being in nature replenishes us so much from a stress standpoint. Even just seeing leaves and foliage. So even having a plant in your room or in the common rooms where you are, it makes a big difference. Even people who can do a virtual reality of being in nature, there's something about being in nature that really tells our brain, I can relax a little bit. So it is really important. I always say, if you really want to do something to boost your well-being every day, get out in nature while you exercise with a friend, right? So going for a walk or going for a jog with a friend outside in nature can be one of the best things. It's kind of sort of the trifecta of well-being.
You understand that you're connected to the earth, that there is no break, there's no detachment from the earth to the water to the sky, the mist to the sky and the cycle return. That's a universal thought.
The bush, the forest, they're my church. They offer me all the existence that I need. When I'm out there in it, it's complete joy and contentment.
What they found is that any kind of meditation, anything that you engage in as a meditation, improves mindfulness. It also reduces stress and anxiety. In fact, meditating, in one study, meditation was an even more effective cure for anxiety than even anti-anxiety drugs themselves. And meditating really is about just quieting your mind. And it really is the practice of just focusing on something. So if it's a guided meditation, and there's many guided meditations on YouTube, for example, where you could just put on a headset and listen. And what you're doing when you're listening to the meditation is you are focusing on the words. You are focusing on what is being said to you. The meditation might even have you imagining different things. That takes you away from kind of your everyday life, your everyday mind chatter, and it allows you to just calm your mind.
1996, I received something called a gift of self-knowledge. It's sort of a meditation, but it's access to peace, to inner peace that's within and inside of myself. It's a place that I can go and I get clarity. I can be like a fly on the wall in my life and get some discernment, know what's going on. And it's just a very precious gift. So having that in my life, it just separates me. It takes me out of a situation and I'm able to get more clarity.
For me, happiness is being completely whole, spirit, soul, and body. Obviously, as a Christian, that three-part being, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is very important to me. And in the same way, I feel that humans are three-part beings, spirit, soul, and body. And there needs to be a connectivity between all three. And that, to me, when it's in sync, is beautiful. It's happiness. The Christian definition of happiness always has a very strong God component in it, a Jesus component, Holy Spirit component in it. But we're still all human, and the things that make us happy, it's pretty common to man. Relationships, beauty, comfort, the usual. For someone like me, praise, worship, music, dance, the arts, that's my calling card to spirituality. If you want my spirit to be whole and my soul to be whole, I need to indulge in those components. I'm a lover of the Psalms because they were written to music and they were played by early musicians. But other people, the practice of prayer. There are some people who are completely grounded in their faith through prayer. There are other people who are grounded in their faith through service, like serving and loving and taking care of other people. Family. It is, the family dynamic is so much healthier if God is central. And so it's probably a good mix of all of those things, but every one of us, because of our uniqueness, is going to focus on a different thing that brings us to spiritual wholeness and that keeps us strong.
We mostly call it spirituality because the word religion scares a lot of clients. I'm not going to church. That's not what we're saying. We would just want you to believe in a higher power. Well, I don't believe in God. I said, so what do you believe in? Is it nature? Is it a creator? Do you have another God that you call a different name than we call God? Do you have people in your family who have passed on and continue to watch out for you? We give them a lot of examples of a higher power. And again, it comes down to that knowing they're not alone, right? And I always tell them that my definition of a higher power is something that you know will be there when you need it. For the most part, they do come to a point where they believe there's something out there because they start looking at their own pasts and they're like, how am I still walking around? Something or somebody had to have helped because I shouldn't still be walking around.
Your faith is very important. So pray that things will get better. And usually they do. But they won't always get better. But they do a lot of the times. Basically that's what it is accepting that you can't fix everything. Not everything's in your control. Let go and trust that things will work out.
It's not only turning inwards or looking above that can bring happiness. Research has found that turning our attention to others and lending a helping hand does us a whole lot of good too.
What we have found time and time again is that when people report higher levels of happiness when they engage in the kind and generous deed as opposed to the selfish or self-directed act. And the story seems to be quite consistent that when people spend money on others or are more likely to donate to charity in the past month, they report higher levels of happiness. And so we've argued that this might be what we call a psychological universal, or something that is detected in most human adults around the globe. When we have this perfect constellation, when we feel like we've chosen to give, we can see the impact of our gift, and when we're giving in highly relational ways, that's when we tend to feel some of the greatest emotional rewards about giving. But there are individuals who give so much of themselves. For instance, caretakers who are devoting hours of their waking day to assist someone else. And though the data in that sphere kind of suggests that there is a tipping point at which when we give too much of ourselves, when we are not able to assist others, and sometimes when we feel we are giving and doing as much as we can, but it's not helping the other person, like caring for a spouse who has a terminal illness. You can imagine how difficult that can be to give so much of yourself and see very little progress. And so there are certainly some factors where giving does not always lead to these positive emotional rewards. There are hundreds, I would wager, hundreds of studies demonstrating, for instance, that volunteers report higher levels of happiness than people who don't volunteer. Now that's great to know, but it's also hard to tease apart. Is it happier people that are more likely to volunteer? Are volunteers getting happy because they're helping and volunteering? Now, after years of studying this question, the most common trend I see in the literature is that it tends to go both ways. Happier people are more likely to help, and helping tends to lead to happiness. My major suggestion would be not to overlook acts of kindness, to take opportunities to help those around us. Even small acts don't need to be large, $500 gifts. It doesn't need to be a Mr. Beast sort of giving for people to feel good about it. In some of our studies, we've looked at even acts as small or as equivalent to $2.50 seem to be enough to boost people's momentary happiness over and above spending what that would have looked like should you be spending on yourself. And so my recommendation would be to take everyday opportunities to help others.
I started to learn how to fly on my 50th birthday. It was a long-awaited milestone in my life, and I always wanted to learn how to fly. There's just some exhilaration when an aircraft actually takes off from the ground. Just that moment, and I wanted to know how to do that, how to capture that for myself. Another thing that I find that helps getting through difficult times is when I'm able to give and be of service. And I would specifically point to my teaching aviation to air cadets. Having the youth, having these kids around me asking all kinds of questions about clouds and how you take off and what do flaps do. It has me get in touch with that passion that I have for flying. But then also I can impart that, I can share that. And it's just such a lovely way that I can give and give back and be of service to my community.
Be of service to others. Go out there and volunteer. Go walk somebody's dog, or go work at the food bank, or go visit an elderly. When I was young, I was in a group where we visited elderly people and we played cards with them. And it's not only is it good for them, but it's good for you.
As society becomes more diverse, one particular way of stepping up to help is to become an ally. Research has found that acting as an ally can have a big impact in many ways.
So there are quite a few definitions around allyship, and primarily the most general, commonly accepted definition is people from dominant social groups in our society stepping up in order to support people from marginalized groups such as women, cis women, people of color. That is the general idea, that you step up in order to support people from marginalized groups in the face of discrimination, in order to reduce discrimination, in order to reduce inequities. my work has primarily honed this definition to also include the idea of well-being. So it's not just about reducing discrimination, but making sure that people are actually able to flourish and thrive and actually experience well-being. We don't want to only try to make it less bad. Let's really focus on what it means to thrive. So every single one of us will probably find ourselves having some privilege. And even when it comes to, for instance, age, in certain aspects, being older is a privilege, and in others, being younger is a privilege. So it all depends on the context. When you may find yourself having a little bit more power than in others simply because of certain identities. And that's when, if you see discrimination or even the fact that someone else is being treated less nicely than they could have been, you have an opportunity to step up and be an ally. In one of our recent studies, we looked at the benefits of allyship, not only for people from marginalized groups, but for people from dominant groups too. And there were some really strong psychological benefits to being an ally. One of which is that folks noticed that they had better relationships even in their personal lives. For men, becoming an ally and doing more allyship work in their organization where they're supporting women who are being marginalized allowed them to become more tuned into the sorts of issues that their family members, their daughters, their partners, their sister, your parent, they were going through that they had not noticed in the past. And as they had started to notice these things and do more work in the organization, they started to have these conversations at home because they're so shocked that they didn't think about this before. And it started to really strengthen their relationships at home. So there's some very clear benefits. Another important one is the sense of personal growth. Feeling like I am growing as a person and that I have the power to change my own life and my own well-being as well as others, and I can have that impact. And that is a really powerful sort of sense that one can come away with when you step up as an ally.
Humans are awful at times. We really know how to mess each other up. We really know how to mess ourselves up. And the only way that we can get past it and get back onto a life of an equilibrium where we have a degree of peace and joy and comfort is by releasing forgiveness to the people who have wronged us and vice versa. It is very hard to live a day-to-day life without forgiveness. And my understanding, I will speak for myself in this one, forgiveness never makes the wrong that was done against me right. It never makes what I did to somebody else that hurt them okay. But the fact that I'm able to say, I get that this was wrong, but I'm not carrying this. I cannot carry this, so I'm letting it go. I release you from you're not getting that emotional pain from me anymore. I'm not giving you that. So forgiveness is a release that allows the person who has been wronged to move forward because there's a decision made. I'm not carrying this. I'm not taking it with me.
We as addicts have no problem forgiving everyone that's ever hurt us. But we can't seem to forgive ourselves. Or there are people out there who have hurt us so bad we want to hang on to that resentment and that anger, but it just infects us. And my biggest struggle always, even from the time I was in treatment, was forgiving someone who's hurt you to that extent, but then realizing that forgiveness isn't for them. It's for the person doing the forgiving so that they can leave that anger, that fear, that sadness, that hate behind and not have it affect them anymore and be free of it and not be renting space in their heads to somebody who's hurt them, you know.
Well, it is well documented that social media actually makes us feel worse when we're comparing ourselves to other people because, a lot of these Instagram posts are are filtered and people look beautiful and skinny, and you know, it's really, if you're comparing yourself, it's really not fun. Or Sally got a boat and I don't have a boat, and you know, so you know, these things can be awfully deflating, I think, when we're comparing ourselves to others. And so one of the things is to limit yourself to social media if you're finding yourself in that situation. But the other thing is to have a new perspective and to say, Sally has a boat. I would love to have a boat one day. Like, some of that for me, please. You know, so instead of being jealous or upset, to say, you know what, some of that for me. And you know, what are the steps that I can take, you know, to have a, or if I don't have a boat, do I have friends who have boats that I could go and enjoy being on a boat with them?
Don't compare yourself to everybody else. Like, don't think that you should be the one living on a yacht in the middle of the ocean. Like, it's okay if you're in a nice little humble house and you're gardening in your backyard. Don't feel like you have to live up to all those standards. Don't be afraid to enjoy the small things in life and to think of where you are and your surroundings and your people and your loved ones. I didn't want to be a school teacher. That when I was young, that's not what I wanted to do. I was going to be a veterinarian. And somehow something steered me back into teaching. So you have to trust what life brings to you. You're not always going to get to do what you think you want to do in life. And just what you are doing, just do the best you can. Like, don't, you know, we set expectations for ourselves sometimes, and we have to be realistic in what people are able to do and not able to do, and just be happy. Like, just be happy with what life is giving you. Make the best of it.
At a psychological level, these data suggest that rather than setting for ourselves very unreachable goals, or looking for, let's say, competition, or striving to maximize our well-being, most people focus on happiness, again, across ages, as a kind of acceptance. So the starting point for happiness is acceptance. So I think, yes, this is really more, happiness is more a matter of acceptance and peace, inner peace. This does not mean that we don't need to set goals and to pursue goals, because we are willing to grow at any time, in any moment of our life. But we can grow, we can set us goals and pursue them hungrily, angrily, or peacefully. In the same, I mean, goals can be reached anyway, but in a more harmonious and less, let's say, competitive way.
There's lots of things that people stress about that are completely out of your control. And so to stress about those things is really kind of useless. Because whether you stress or don't stress, it doesn't matter, because it's completely out of your control. So you might as well not stress, because stress will put pressure on your heart. You know, we do have, when we feel things are threatening, we do have a cardiac activation. So you've got, if you want to manage your health, you have to manage your stress at the same time.
Well, it's not that those things don't happen to Christians, because obviously, of course they do. All challenges are common to man. When someone is well grounded in their faith, and even though it's very hard to do, because you rely on faith when you least want to, but there is a comfort in the presence of God. There is a comfort in His Word. There is a comfort in just knowing that this too shall pass.
Don't try and control everything. You're not going to be able to. So try and figure out what's most important to you and focus on that rather than all the rest of the noise in the world that we have no control over. because that'll just drive you crazy and stress you out.
One of the first things, like I did with my grandparents did whenever they arrived somewhere and when they killed an animal and disposed of an animal, they always put down tobacco to give thanks. Okay? That was one of the key things. If they took fish from the land, they gave thanks. If they harvested medicine, they took a moment to give thanks and gratitude, okay? That kind of centered you, in the 21st century, something that centered us, and it brought our spirit to a center point. So we could get a strong response about it, whether it was emotional or spiritual or intellectual or physical. We have to do something to. And so with that, we began to heal ourselves. And with all these strategies, you need to give thanks.
Things that I'm grateful for could be just little things, waking up and breathing. That would be one. Sometimes they're more specific. I'm grateful for my house, or I'm grateful for the food that I can buy and cook and prepare, and I'm grateful for my car that I could travel and do the things that I can do.
When I was really young, I didn't even think about being grateful. It just never occurred to me that I should be. Does that make sense? But, as I grew older, gratitude, I have, even today, I have on Facebook, Gratitude Friday. I do my post, Gratitude Friday, and I express what I'm grateful for that day. And then I ask, what are you grateful for today? And that helps me. And I've had other people respond telling me that they do like that idea,
For many, nothing brings more anxiety and sadness than death, or even just the thought of it, whether it's one's own or that of a loved one. But for some, perspective is everything, and they believe that given the right perspective, death can be viewed not only with a sense of peace, but with joy.
Oh, I don't know that death is the problem. I think the problem is more, do you believe in the afterlife? We had this discussion just a week or so ago in service. What's heaven? And, well, first of all, it is the epitome, the top, the absolute everything that brings great joy and passion, all the gifts of God, and then multiply that by a gazillion times and experience that in whatever, I got a lot of questions when I get there, but I know it's a place and I know I'm going there, and knowing death is a transition makes death bearable.
My grandfather always spoke in metaphors. He always spoke about going on a journey. He says, one of these days I'm going to go on further than you. Okay, I'm going to light a fire, but I'll always be there. So you'll miss me, but you know that I'm going ahead of you up the river. And so that's one of the reasons I always paint the land. I always paint the traveler in it, canoeist, that he's gone up the river. He's not gone. He may, in fact, be gone physically, but spiritually and emotionally for us. For me to understand it, I had to go through the death of my own parents. I've met some great, wonderful people, and this one lady from Fort Albany, she talked about the same thing too. She's very spiritual, very church-going lady, and I'd go to help her at the church every Sunday morning, and she'd always talk about that, of going further ahead. But she was never gone. We don't talk about being gone. We just talk about we're on another trip, gone further down the river, up the river, okay? And we'd be waiting there for you. So in that sense, it's a beautiful way to understand life.
Get up with joy, look forward to the day, and go out there and do what you have to do. Always with joy, right? Don't look at what happened and how unhappy you were yesterday. That doesn't matter. You can't fix it. Let's look at today, because really, today is the only day you have. You might have it tomorrow, but you may not. So do what you have to do today and be happy doing it.
Seizing the day and cherishing it as if it's the only one that we have got. Sounds like good advice for experiencing a wonderful life. I wish you much joy.